Hey guys, tonight we journey back to a time when love was not something you found, but something arranged, negotiated, and sometimes quietly endured. A time when the idea of dating, as you know, it simply didn't exist. Instead, relationships were shaped by survival, duty, family ambition, and the quiet weight of expectation. So, as you settle in, maybe under a blanket, maybe with the lights dimmed low, let yourself drift into a slower world, where even something as simple as falling in love was never truly simple at all. In medieval Europe, what we would call dating today had no real equivalent. There were no casual outings, no shared laughter over coffee, no long conversations just to see where things go. Instead, relationships, especially for the majority of people, were deeply tied to economics, land, survival, and social order. Marriage was rarely about romance. It was about stability, alliances, and sometimes necessity. For noble families, the process often began long before the individuals involved had any say in the matter. A young girl, sometimes no older than 12 or 13, might already be promised to someone she had never met. Her future husband could be years older, chosen not for his personality or kindness, but for his land, his title, or his political usefulness. In these cases, what replaced dating was negotiation, carefully arranged discussions between families that treated marriage almost like a business contract. But even outside the noble class, among peasants and villagers, things were not as free as one might imagine. While there was slightly more room for personal choice, practical concerns still dominated. A marriage meant another pair of working hands, another mouth to feed, and a merging of two households' resources. Love could exist, certainly, but it was often expected to grow after marriage, not before it. Yet, despite all this, people were still people. They felt attraction, curiosity, longing. And so, in the quiet spaces between strict social rules, small forms of courtship began to emerge. In many villages, young men and women would encounter each other during communal activities, harvest festivals, church gatherings, or long days working in the fields. These were some of the only opportunities where interaction could happen naturally. A glance across a crowded gathering, a brief conversation while carrying water, a shared moment during a dance. These small exchanges carried a weight that modern dating rarely holds. Courtship, when it did happen, was subtle. A young man might show interest by offering small tokens, a ribbon, a carved piece of wood, or even something as simple as helping a girl's family with labor. These gestures were not grand declarations of love, but quiet signals of intent. They said, in their own way, I am capable. I can provide. I am worth considering. For young women, expressing interest was even more restrained. Social expectations demanded modesty and caution. A girl who appeared too eager risked damaging her reputation, which could affect her chances of marriage entirely. So, affection was often communicated indirectly through prolonged eye contact, small smiles, or simply allowing a young man to continue his visits without rejection. And then there was the role of the family. Rarely could a relationship progress without parental approval. A father, in particular, held significant authority over his daughter's future. Even if a young couple found themselves drawn to each other, that connection had to pass through the filter of family expectations. Was the young man strong enough? Did he have land? Could he support a household? These questions mattered far more than whether the couple enjoyed each other's company. Interestingly, in some regions, a practice known as bundling emerged, a custom that might seem strange today. It involved a young couple spending the night together, fully clothed, often in the same bed, with a physical barrier placed between them. The idea was to allow conversation and emotional bonding in a controlled environment. It was, in a sense, one of the closest things medieval society had to dating, a supervised space where two people could talk, laugh quietly, and perhaps begin to understand one another. But even this came with strict boundaries. Reputation was everything. A single rumor could spread quickly through a small village, and once a person's character was questioned, it could be difficult to recover. This meant that every interaction, every glance, every whispered conversation carried a quiet tension. Religion also played a central role in shaping relationships. The church was deeply involved in defining what was acceptable. Marriage was considered a sacred bond, and any form of intimacy outside of it was discouraged, sometimes harshly punished. This created a world where desire existed, but was tightly controlled, often pushed into the shadows. At the same time, the church did introduce one idea that slowly began to change things: the concept of mutual consent. While families still arranged many marriages, the idea that both individuals should agree to the union began to take root. It wasn't always perfectly enforced, but it marked an important shift. It suggested, quietly, that personal feelings might matter, at least a little. Among the nobility, another layer of complexity appeared in the form of courtly love. This was less about actual relationships and more about idealized affection. A knight might devote himself to a lady, often one who was already married, and express his admiration through poetry, songs, and acts of bravery. It was a performance, in many ways, a stylized version of love that existed within strict boundaries. Courtly love allowed for emotional expression in a society that otherwise restricted it. It created a space where longing, admiration, and even heartbreak could be explored, but always at a distance, always within the rules. It was not about building a life together. It was about the feeling itself. For ordinary people, though, life was far less poetic. Relationships were shaped by the rhythms of daily survival. Long hours of labor left little time for romance. And yet, small moments still existed: a shared meal after a long day, a quiet walk at dusk, a conversation held just a little longer than necessary. These moments, though simple, carried a depth that is easy to overlook. It's also worth remembering that life expectancy was shorter, and the risks of illness, injury, and childbirth were ever present. This added another layer to relationships. Marriage was not just about companionship. It was about facing an uncertain world together. It was about building something stable in a time when stability was never guaranteed. As we move deeper into this world, it becomes clear that what we call dating today is, in many ways, a luxury, something made possible by time, freedom, and individual choice. In the medieval period, those things were limited. And so, love had to find its way through narrow paths, shaped by rules, expectations, and the quiet pressures of survival. And yet, despite all of this, people still found ways to connect. They still experienced the nervous excitement of seeing someone they admired. They still felt the quiet comfort of companionship. They still, in their own way, searched for something more than just survival. As the evening settles over a small medieval village, and the sounds of daily labor begin to fade, you can almost imagine two figures lingering just a moment longer than necessary. A few words exchanged, a brief smile, nothing dramatic, nothing that would be written in history, but in that moment, something real. And perhaps that's where our story truly begins. The air lingers gently between them, carrying the faint scent of damp earth and wood smoke as the last traces of daylight slip behind the low horizon. Neither of them seems in a hurry to leave. In a world where time is measured by labor and necessity, these quiet pauses feel almost stolen, small fragments of something softer, something unspoken. The young man shifts his weight slightly, glancing toward the narrow path that leads back toward the cluster of cottages. He knows he should go. There are chores waiting, tools to be put away. Perhaps a father already wondering why he has taken longer than usual. And yet, he remains. Not because he has something important to say, but because leaving feels premature. The girl, standing just a few steps away, adjusts the edge of her shawl. Her movements are subtle, practiced, as though she has learned how to occupy space without drawing attention. She does not look directly at him for long, but she doesn't leave either. That, in itself, is its own kind of answer. In medieval life, moments like this were often the closest thing to emotional exploration. There were no clear conversations about feelings, no confessions laid out under starlight, as in modern stories. Instead, everything unfolded slowly, carefully, through gestures and presence. Staying just a little longer than necessary could mean more than any spoken declaration. Eventually, he offers a quiet goodnight, his voice low, almost hesitant. She responds in kind, her tone soft but steady. And with that, the moment dissolves. They turn in opposite directions, walking back toward their separate homes, carrying with them the quiet weight of something that neither of them has named. Days pass, then weeks. Their interactions remain brief, woven into the fabric of daily life. A shared task in the fields, a passing exchange near the well, a moment of laughter that disappears almost as quickly as it comes. Each encounter builds upon the last, forming something gradual and fragile. But outside of these moments, the world continues to press in. For the young man, expectations are clear. He is expected to prove himself not through words, but through work. Strength, reliability, and the ability to provide are the qualities that matter. If he hopes to pursue anything more with the girl, he must first demonstrate that he can support a household. This might mean saving what little he earns, gaining the approval of elders, or even negotiating for access to land. For the girl, the situation is even more delicate. Her future is not entirely her own. Conversations about her potential marriage may already be happening without her full knowledge. Her parents, particularly her father, are likely considering options, men who could offer security, stability, or advantage. Whether or not she feels a quiet connection with someone may matter less than the practical realities of survival. And so, what begins as a simple series of shared moments slowly becomes something more complicated. Not because the feelings themselves are complex, but because the world around them is. In some villages, when a young man wished to show more serious intent, he would begin to visit the girl's home in the evenings. These visits were not private. They took place in the presence of family members, often by the hearth, where conversation could unfold under watchful eyes. This was not about romance in the modern sense. It was about evaluation. He might speak with her father about work, about crops, about weather patterns and livestock. These discussions, though seemingly ordinary, were a way of demonstrating competence and character. At the same time, he would exchange occasional words with the girl herself, though always within the boundaries of propriety. Sometimes, these visits would stretch late into the evening. The fire would burn low, casting long shadows across the room, and the quiet rhythm of conversation would take on a slower, more reflective tone. In these moments, something resembling connection could begin to form, not through grand gestures, but through consistency and presence. If the family approved, the relationship might move forward. But approval was never guaranteed. There were many reasons a match could be rejected. Perhaps the young man lacked sufficient resources. Perhaps his family held a reputation that raised concerns. Or perhaps another offer, more advantageous, had already been considered. In such cases, the quiet connection that had been forming could be brought to an abrupt end, and there would be no dramatic confrontation, no long explanations, just a gradual absence, fewer opportunities to meet, fewer reasons to speak, until, eventually, the connection faded into memory. For those who did move forward, however, the next stage brought its own set of customs. In some regions, a formal betrothal would be arranged. This was a public acknowledgement of intent to marry, often marked by a small gathering or ceremony. It signaled to the community that the two individuals were now committed at least in principle, to a shared future. Yet even at this stage, the relationship remained different from what we might expect today. Physical affection was still limited. Emotional expression, while slightly more open, remained restrained. The focus was not on deepening romantic connection, but on preparing for the realities of married life. There were practical matters to consider. Where would they live? How would they support themselves? What responsibilities would each person carry? These questions shaped the relationship far more than any notion of compatibility or shared interests. And still, within all of this, small human moments continued to exist. A shared glance during a crowded gathering, a quiet joke exchanged while others were not listening. The comfort of knowing that someone, somewhere in the village, was thinking of you. These were the threads that wove something softer into the rigid structure of medieval life. It's easy, from a modern perspective, to view this world as restrictive, even harsh. And in many ways, it was. Freedom of choice was limited. Social expectations were powerful. The space for personal exploration was narrow, but within those constraints, people adapted. They found ways to express care, to build trust, to create meaning. Not in large, dramatic ways, but in small, consistent ones. As seasons change, the rhythm of life continues. The fields shift from green to gold, then to bare earth. The air grows colder, and the days shorter. With each passing cycle, the pressure to move forward, to decide, to commit, becomes more pronounced. For our two figures, the quiet connection that once existed in fleeting moments now stands at a crossroads. Will it be recognized, supported, allowed to grow into something lasting? Or will it be set aside, quietly, in favor of something more practical, more acceptable? In medieval life, the answer was rarely left to chance. And as winter begins to settle over the village, bringing with it long nights and uncertain days, the path ahead begins to narrow, not with a sudden decision, but with a series of small, inevitable steps. The first frost arrives quietly, settling over the village in the early hours before dawn. By the time the sun begins to rise, the ground is edged in white, each blade of grass stiff and fragile beneath the cold. Smoke curls slowly from the rooftops as families wake, pulling themselves from sleep into another day shaped by routine and necessity. Inside the small cottages, life becomes more enclosed during the winter months. The long hours of darkness bring people closer together physically, but not always emotionally. Work does not stop, it simply changes. There are tools to mend, clothes to repair, food stores to manage carefully so they will last until spring. And within these confined spaces, conversations that might have once been avoided begin to surface more often. For the girl, this means hearing her future discussed more directly now. Her parents speak in quieter tones, but not so quietly that she cannot understand. Names are mentioned. Possibilities are weighed. There is a certain practicality in their voices, a kind of careful calculation. They are not unkind, but their concern is rooted in survival, not sentiment. The young man, too, feels the shift. Opportunities to see her become fewer as the cold intensifies. Daily tasks are more rigidly divided, leaving less room for chance encounters. What once felt natural, passing each other in the fields, exchanging brief words by the well, now requires intention. And intention, in this world, carries risk. So he begins to make more deliberate efforts. One evening, as darkness settles early, he arrives at her family's cottage. The visit is not unexpected, but it is significant. He steps inside, removing his cap, greeting her parents with a respectful nod. The warmth of the fire contrasts sharply with the cold outside, and for a moment, he simply stands there, letting himself adjust. Her father acknowledges him with a measured expression. There is no hostility, but no immediate warmth either. Approval, in this setting, is never freely given. It must be earned gradually, through consistency. He takes a seat near the hearth, joining the quiet rhythm of the household. Conversation begins slowly, moving through familiar topics. The condition of the stored grain, the state of the nearby forest, the rumors of sickness in a neighboring village. These exchanges, though ordinary, serve a purpose. They establish presence. They demonstrate reliability. The girl sits nearby, her hands busy with mending, her posture composed. She listens more than she speaks, occasionally adding a soft comment when appropriate. Their eyes meet only briefly, but those brief moments carry more weight than any extended conversation could. As the evening stretches on, something subtle begins to take shape. Not a declaration, not a clear turning point, but a quiet acknowledgement. The young man's presence is being accepted, at least for now. He is no longer just a passing figure in the village. He is becoming part of the household's rhythm, even if only temporarily. This is how many relationships advanced in medieval life, not through dramatic gestures, but through repeated, quiet inclusion. Over the following weeks, his visits continue. Each one follows a similar pattern, yet each carries its own small variations. Sometimes the conversation is lighter, touched with faint humor. Other times, it is more serious, shaped by concerns about the harshness of winter or the uncertainty of the coming year. Gradually, the father begins to ask more direct questions. Not intrusive, but purposeful. Questions about work, about plans, about capability. The kind of questions that do not require immediate answers, but reveal much through the way they are answered. And the young man responds carefully. He speaks with respect, choosing his words with thought, aware that every response contributes to the impression he leaves behind. This is not a test he can pass in a single evening. It is something that unfolds over time. Meanwhile, the girl's role remains largely unchanged on the surface. She continues her tasks, maintains her composure, follows the expectations placed upon her. But internally, something is shifting. She begins to notice the patterns more clearly. The way he speaks, the way he listens, the consistency of his presence. These observations form a quiet understanding not built on promises, but on repetition. In a world where words are limited, actions become the language of intention. Outside, the village itself seems to slow under the weight of winter. Paths become harder to travel. Gatherings become less frequent. The sense of isolation deepens, making the connections that do exist feel more significant. It is during this time that the idea of commitment begins to take on a different shape. In some cases, a formal step would now be considered. A discussion between families, more structured than before. The possibility of a betrothal. But such decisions are never rushed. They are approached with caution, with attention to detail, with an understanding of the consequences. Because once a path is chosen, it is not easily changed. Yet not all stories move forward in a straight line. There are always uncertainties, unexpected developments, another family expressing interest, a sudden change in circumstances, a poor harvest, an illness, a shift in social standing. Any of these could alter the course of events. And so, even as something begins to form between them, it remains fragile. One evening, as the wind presses softly against the walls of the cottage and the fire burns low, the conversation takes a slightly different turn. It is not abrupt, not dramatic, but there is a new tone beneath it. The father speaks more directly now, his words measured but clear. He is not making a decision, not yet, but he is signaling that a decision will come, that the time for quiet observation is nearing its end. The young man listens, understanding the weight of what is being said without needing it to be stated outright. He responds with the same care as before, but there is a subtle shift in his voice, a recognition that the path ahead is narrowing. The girl sitting nearby feels this change as well, not through the words themselves, but through the space between them. The pauses, the glances, the quiet understanding that something is approaching. After that evening, the atmosphere changes slightly. There is still conversation, still routine, still the steady rhythm of winter life. But beneath it, there is a growing sense of anticipation. Not excitement exactly, not fear either. Something quieter than both. The sense that a choice, once distant and abstract, is now becoming real. And in medieval life, choices like these are rarely about what one wants. They are about what is possible. As the weeks continue and the cold begins, ever so slightly, to ease, the first hints of spring feel distant but inevitable. Snow softens. Ice thins. The world begins slowly to shift again. And with that shift comes the understanding that whatever has been building through the long winter cannot remain uncertain forever. Soon it will need to take shape, one way or another. As the last traces of winter begin to loosen their grip, the village slowly exhales. what was once frozen and silent starts to stir again. The ground softens beneath cautious footsteps, and the first signs of green push gently through the soil, almost as if the earth itself is waking after a long and careful sleep. With the arrival of early spring, life expands outward once more. Doors that had remained shut through the cold months are opened again. People linger outside a little longer. The narrow paths between cottages grow busier, filled with quiet movement and the low hum of returning activity. And with this change, the space for interaction widens again. But so does the pressure. For the young man, the shift in season brings both opportunity and urgency. The work ahead is demanding. Fields must be prepared, tools repaired, livestock tended. It is a time that requires strength and endurance, but also visibility. In a community where everyone observes everyone else, this is when effort is noticed. He works longer hours now, not only out of necessity, but with a quiet awareness that he is being seen. The way he handles a plow, the consistency of his labor, the manner in which he cooperates with others, all of these details contribute to how he is judged. Not openly, not with direct commentary, but through a collective understanding that forms over time. The girl, too, becomes more present in the daily rhythm of the village. Tasks that were once confined indoors now take her outside again. Carrying water, tending small garden plots, assisting with early planting, these routines place her once more within the shared spaces of the community. Their paths cross more often now, but something about their interactions has changed. Where there was once a sense of quiet discovery, there is now a subtle awareness of being observed. Conversations are shorter, more measured. Glances are quicker, more cautious. It is not that the connection has faded, it is that it has entered a different phase, one shaped not just by feeling, but by expectation. In medieval life, once a relationship began to show signs of seriousness, it no longer belonged entirely to the individuals involved. It became something the community watched, assessed, and, in its own way, influenced. There are no official announcements yet, no formal declarations, but people begin to notice patterns, the repeated presence, the familiar exchanges, the way two individuals seem to move within the same orbit. And from these observations, quiet assumptions begin to form. Some are supportive, others are more cautious. A few may even be skeptical, but all of them contribute to an invisible pressure, a sense that the relationship is no longer just a private matter. One afternoon, as the sun sits high, but not yet harsh, a small gathering takes place near the edge of the village. It is not a formal event, just a shared effort to begin preparing one of the larger fields. Several families work together, their movements steady and coordinated. It is here, among the turning soil and the quiet rhythm of labor, that the young man and the girl find themselves working in closer proximity than usual. Their conversation at first is simple. Observations about the work, the condition of the ground, the pace of the day. But gradually, as the hours pass, something shifts. There is a moment, brief, almost easy to miss, where the conversation deepens. Not dramatically, not in a way that would draw attention, but enough to carry a different weight. He asks her a question, not about work, not about the village, but something slightly more personal. Something that, in another time, might be considered ordinary. Here, it feels significant. She pauses before answering, not because she is uncertain, but because she understands what the question represents. A step beyond the surface, a movement towards something more direct. Her response is quiet, thoughtful. And for a moment, the space between them feels different, less guarded, more real. But just as quickly as it appears, the moment passes. Someone nearby calls out. The rhythm of work resumes, and whatever was beginning to take shape retreats back beneath the surface. This is the nature of connection in their world. It does not unfold in uninterrupted lines. It appears in fragments, in glimpses, in moments that must be carefully held, and just as carefully released. As the days continue, these fragments begin to accumulate. An extra moment of conversation at the end of a task. A shared walk, brief but intentional, along a path that both could have taken alone. A look that lingers just a second longer than necessary. Each of these moments, on its own, might seem small, but together, they form something more substantial, something that begins to feel difficult to ignore. And yet, even as this quiet connection strengthens, the reality of their situation remains unchanged. One evening, as the light begins to fade and the village settles into its softer nighttime rhythm, the young man is invited once again into her family's home. But this time, the atmosphere feels different from the moment he steps inside. There is a sense of purpose in the room, a stillness that suggests something has already been decided or is about to be. Her father sits near the hearth, his posture steady, his expression thoughtful. Her mother is present as well, her hands resting in her lap, her attention focused. The girl takes her place quietly, her composure unchanged, though something in her stillness suggests awareness. The young man greets them, as he always has, but he senses immediately that this evening will not follow the same pattern as the others. The conversation begins formally, not unkindly, but with a clarity that leaves little room for uncertainty. Her father speaks of practical matters first. The condition of the coming season, the expectations of work, the responsibilities that come with maintaining a household. These topics are familiar, but tonight they are presented with a different weight. Then, gradually, the focus shifts. He speaks of his observations, of what he has seen over the past months, of the young man's presence, his effort, his consistency. None of it is exaggerated. None of it is overly praised, but it is acknowledged. And then, raising his voice, without changing his tone. He brings the conversation to its true purpose. He asks a question, not a complicated one, not one that requires a long explanation, but one that carries the full weight of what has been building over time. What are your intentions? The room grows quiet. The fire continues to crackle softly, its light flickering against the walls. Outside, the evening settles into stillness. The young man does not answer immediately, not because he does not know what to say, but because he understands that his answer matters in a way that nothing else has so far. This is not a moment for hesitation, but it is also not one for carelessness. When he finally speaks, his voice is steady, measured, honest, and as his words settle into the room, something shifts, not dramatically, not in a way that changes everything at once, but enough to mark the moment as something real, something that cannot easily be undone. The girl listens, her expression calm, her gaze lowered just slightly. She does not interrupt. She does not react outwardly. But within her, something begins to take shape, something that has been forming slowly, quietly, now moving toward definition. The conversation continues for some time after that. Details are discussed. Possibilities are considered. Nothing is finalized, but the direction is clear. A path is beginning to form. And once a path begins to form in this world, it tends to lead somewhere definite. As the young man eventually steps back out into the cool night air, the village around him feels both familiar and changed. The same narrow paths, the same distant sounds, the same quiet stillness, and yet everything feels slightly more certain. Not easier, not lighter, but clearer. Behind him, inside the cottage, the girl remains seated for a moment longer, listening to the fading sound of his footsteps. And in that quiet space, between what has been and what is yet to come, she allows herself a single, unguarded thought, not about duty, not about expectation, but about possibility. The night carries a quiet stillness after his footsteps fade, as though the village itself is holding its breath. Inside the cottage, the conversation has ended, but its presence lingers in the air, woven into the silence that follows. No one speaks immediately. The girl remains seated, her hands resting lightly in her lap, her gaze lowered. Her parents exchange a brief look, not one of surprise, nor even uncertainty, but something more measured. A quiet acknowledgement that a threshold has been crossed. In medieval life, moments like this were rarely marked with celebration. There were no sudden embraces, no visible relief. Instead, decisions settled slowly, like dust after movement, gradual, almost imperceptible, but undeniable once they had come to rest. Her father eventually rises, adjusting his posture with a soft exhale. The discussion, for now, is over. There will be more conversations, more considerations, but the direction is set. He steps toward the door briefly, glancing out into the night as if measuring something unseen, then returns without comment. Her mother resumes a small task near the hearth, though her movements are quieter than before. There is a sense of careful transition, as though the household is adjusting itself around a new reality. The girl says nothing, but inside, her thoughts begin to move. Not quickly, not chaotically, but with a quiet, steady rhythm. She replays the evening, not the entire conversation, but fragments of it. The tone of his voice, the way he answered, the space between words. In another time, she might have spoken freely, asked questions, explored her own feelings out loud. But here, those reflections remain internal, not hidden exactly, just unspoken. Over the following days, the village continues its steady return to spring. The fields demand attention, and life once again organizes itself around work. But beneath the routine, something has shifted. Word does not spread instantly, but it begins to move in quiet ways. A comment here, an observation there. Nothing direct, nothing formal, but enough for people to begin to understand that something is taking shape. The young man feels it too. As he moves through his tasks, he notices subtle changes in how others regard him. A longer look, a brief nod of acknowledgement, a question asked with a slightly different tone. These are not dramatic shifts, but they carry meaning. He is no longer simply a member of the village, moving through his own path. He is now someone whose future is beginning to align with another's. With that alignment comes expectation. His work becomes even more important now, not because it has changed, but because it is being seen differently. Each action contributes to an emerging identity, not just as an individual, but as a future husband, a future provider. For the girl, the changes are quieter, but no less significant. Her responsibilities remain the same, but the way they are viewed begins to shift. She is observed not just as a daughter, but as someone preparing for a new role. Skills that may have once gone unnoticed now carry greater weight. Her ability to manage tasks, to maintain composure, to contribute to the household, all of it becomes part of an unspoken evaluation. And yet, despite all of this, the connection between them does not suddenly become more open or expressive. If anything, it becomes more restrained, now that the possibility of a shared future is acknowledged. There is a greater need for caution. Appearances matter even more. Interactions must remain appropriate, measured, aligned with expectation. But within those boundaries, something deeper begins to form. It is no longer just curiosity, no longer just the quiet interest of two people noticing one another. It is a growing sense of familiarity, a recognition, a subtle understanding that, despite the structure surrounding them, something personal exists within it. One afternoon, as the sun warms the earth just enough to soften the air, they find themselves once again walking along the same narrow path that runs just beyond the edge of the village. This time, there is no pretense of coincidence. The meeting is not formally arranged, but it is not entirely accidental either. Both of them have chosen this moment in the quiet way that people in their world make choices. For a while, they walk without speaking. The path stretches ahead, bordered by early signs of growth, small green shoots breaking through the soil, the faint hum of insects returning to life. The world feels in transition, balanced between what it has been and what it is becoming. Eventually, he speaks. His words are simple, but they carry more weight than before. Not because they are different in content, but because of the context in which they are spoken. He does not speak of grand plans or distant dreams. Instead, he speaks of practical things. Work that needs to be done, preparations that lie ahead, the reality of what their lives might look like if things continue in this direction. And yet, beneath those practical words, there is something else, a quiet effort to include her, to acknowledge that whatever comes next will not belong to him alone. She listens carefully, her attention steady. When she responds, her voice is calm, her words thoughtful. She does not challenge him, but she does not simply agree either. There is a balance in her tone, a subtle assertion of presence. This, too, is part of medieval courtship, though it is rarely described as such. Not the exchange of affection, but the gradual alignment of lives. The understanding that two people will need to move together within a shared structure, navigating responsibilities, expectations, and uncertainties as one. Their conversation continues in this quiet way, moving between practical matters and brief, almost unnoticeable moments of something more personal. At one point, they pause, not because they have reached a destination, but because there is a natural break in the path, a place where the ground dips slightly, where the view opens just enough to see beyond the immediate surroundings. They stand there for a moment, side by side, not quite looking at each other, not quite looking away. And in that stillness, something settles. Not a dramatic realization, not a sudden certainty, but a quiet acceptance. The path ahead is not entirely clear, but it is beginning to feel shared. After a time, they turn back toward the village. There is work to be done, always, but as they walk, the space between them feels different than it once did. Not smaller, not larger, just understood. And in a world where so much remains uncertain, that understanding carries its own quiet kind of comfort as the days continue to lengthen and the rhythm of life builds toward the fullness of spring. The process that began with small, unnoticed moments has now become something more defined, not yet complete, not yet fully decided, but no longer uncertain in the way it once was. And soon, whether through quiet agreement or formal declaration, it will move into its next stage. Because in medieval life, once a connection reached this point, it rarely remained suspended for long. It moved forward, step by step, choice by choice, until it became something permanent. The rhythm of the village deepens as spring fully takes hold. What began as a cautious thaw has now unfolded into steady movement, fields turning, seeds pressed into soil, animals guided back into open pasture. Life regains its pace, and with that pace comes a quiet sense of inevitability. For the two of them, the slow unfolding of days now carries a different weight. What once felt like possibility has begun to feel like direction. Not something distant, but something approaching. It happens without announcement. No single moment marks the transition. No gathering is called. No words spoken that clearly divide what was from what will be. Instead, it is a series of small acknowledgments, subtle shifts that together form something more concrete. One evening, as the light softens and the village settles into its familiar calm, the young man arrives once again at her family's cottage. But this time, the purpose is understood before he even steps inside. There is no uncertainty in the air. Her father greets him with the same steady composure as always, but there is a quiet acceptance now, a recognition that the process of observation has reached its conclusion. Her mother offers a small nod, her expression calm, almost reflective. The girl takes her place near the hearth, her posture unchanged, yet her stillness feels different, less guarded, more resolved. The conversation begins simply, as it always has, but it does not linger in small details for long. Instead, it moves directly toward what has been building. There is no elaborate speech, no formal declaration spoken in grand terms. Medieval life rarely allowed for such moments, but there is clarity. An agreement begins to take shape, not written, not recorded, but understood by all present. The young man expresses his intention in careful, steady words. He speaks of responsibility, of readiness, of his willingness to take on the role that lies ahead. He does not promise ease or comfort, because those are things no one can guarantee. Instead, he offers consistency, effort, and presence. Her father listens, as he has always done, but this time, his response carries a different tone. There is still caution, still the measured weight of consideration, but there is also approval, not expressed openly, not celebrated, but given. And with that, the path that has been forming quietly over weeks and months is finally acknowledged as something real. A betrothal, not announced to the entire village in that moment, but understood within the household. A commitment that will soon become visible to others, but for now exists in this quiet, contained space. The girl listens as the agreement settles around her. Her role in this moment is subtle, but not absent. The question of consent, though shaped by the expectations of the time, is still present. When she is asked, her answer is simple, a quiet yes, not dramatic, not hesitant, but clear, and in that single word, everything shifts. What was once uncertain is now defined. What was once developing is now decided. The conversation continues briefly after that, turning to practical matters once more. There are details to consider: timing, preparation, the steps that will follow. But these discussions feel different now. They are no longer about possibility. They are about execution. When the young man leaves the cottage that night, the air feels lighter, though nothing visible has changed. The same paths stretch before him. The same sounds drift through the village. And yet, the future that once felt distant now feels close enough to touch. Inside, the girl remains near the hearth for a while after he is gone. Her parents speak quietly, their tones calm, already moving forward in their thoughts. But she allows herself a moment of stillness, not to question what has happened, but to absorb it. There is no overwhelming rush of emotion, no sudden transformation. Instead, there is a gradual settling, a recognition that her life has shifted direction, not abruptly, but with a quiet certainty that leaves little room for doubt. In the days that follow, the change becomes more visible. Word spreads, as it always does, through small conversations and shared understanding. There is no official announcement, but people begin to treat them differently. The young man is greeted with a touch more respect, a subtle acknowledgement of his new status. The girl is regarded with a similar shift, not just as a daughter within her household, but as someone preparing to leave it. This is one of the quieter, more complex aspects of medieval relationships. A betrothal is not just the joining of two individuals. It is the beginning of a transition. For him, it means building something new. For her, it means leaving something behind. There are preparations to be made now. Practical, necessary steps that bring the abstract idea of marriage closer to reality. Clothing must be prepared, household items gathered, arrangements discussed between families. None of it is elaborate, but all of it is important. And within these preparations, there are moments, small, fleeting ones, where the two of them begin to experience something different. They are allowed slightly more freedom to interact now, though still within boundaries. Conversations become a bit more direct. Time spent in each other's presence feels less uncertain. But even here, expression remains restrained. There are no grand declarations of love, no open displays of affection. What grows between them is quieter than that, a sense of familiarity, a growing ease, a shared understanding that does not need to be spoken aloud. One afternoon, as they work alongside others in the fields, their hands moving in steady rhythm with the soil, they exchange a brief look. It is not the first look they have shared, but it is the first that feels settled. Not questioning, not searching, just present. And in that presence, there is something steady, something that suggests that whatever lies ahead, they will face it not as strangers brought together by circumstance, but as two people who have, in their own quiet way, come to know one another. As the sun begins to dip and the day draws to a close, the village continues its gentle hum of activity. Nothing outwardly dramatic has happened. No great event, no sudden chain, and yet everything has shifted, because in medieval life, this is how something as significant as a relationship moves forward, not with spectacle, but with quiet certainty. And from here, the next stage awaits, not the beginning of something new, but the continuation of something that has already begun to take root. With the betrothal quietly settled into place, life does not pause to celebrate. There's no break in routine, no moment where the village stops to acknowledge the shift in any grand way. Instead, everything continues. Fields demand attention. Tools wear down. Meals must be prepared. And within that steady flow, the meaning of what has changed begins to unfold gradually. The girl wakes the next morning, as she always has. The same dim light filters into the cottage. The same sounds of early movement, her mother stirring near the hearth, the faint creak of wood, the distant call of someone already outside beginning their work. And yet, beneath the familiar rhythm, there is a subtle awareness that something is no longer the same. Her place in this home, though unchanged in the immediate sense, now carries an invisible boundary. She is still a daughter here, but not entirely. Her future has begun to pull her elsewhere. This realization does not arrive all at once. It settles slowly, like the warmth of the morning fire spreading through the room. Not overwhelming, not uncomfortable, just present. For the young man, the shift is different. His life remains rooted where it has always been, but now it extends outward. His responsibilities are no longer limited to himself or his current household. They are beginning to stretch towards something that does not yet fully exist, but soon will. This creates a quiet pressure, not spoken, not imposed directly, but felt in the way he moves through each day. He works with greater focus now, not because he is trying to prove something. Those efforts have already been made, but because the future he is building feels closer, more real. Every task becomes part of preparation. Every decision carries a little more weight. And yet, despite these changes, the connection between them continues to evolve in small, almost imperceptible ways. They are allowed more time together now, though still within the expectations of the village. A shared walk may last a little longer. A conversation may drift slightly beyond practical matters. But even with this increased closeness, there remains a quiet restraint. It is not distance, exactly. It is a kind of carefulness, an understanding that what they are building must be steady, not rushed. One evening, as the light fades into a soft, muted glow, they find themselves once again walking along the familiar path beyond the village. The air is warmer now, carrying the faint scent of growing things, the subtle promise of the season ahead. Their steps fall into rhythm easily. There is no need to fill the silence immediately. It exists comfortably between them, no longer something that needs to be avoided or broken. After a while, he speaks. This time, his words are not just about work or preparation. They move slightly beyond that, still grounded in reality, but touching on something more personal. He speaks of what he hopes their household might be like, not in grand or idealized terms, but in simple, practical images. A place that is stable, a space where work is shared, where the challenges of life are met together rather than alone. There is no mention of love in the way it might be spoken today, but there is something else, a sense of partnership. She listens, her expression thoughtful. When she responds, her words are quiet, but they carry a subtle strength. She speaks not just as someone being included, but as someone who understands that her role will shape that future just as much as his. This is one of the quieter truths of medieval relationships. While the structure often appears one-sided, the reality within the household is more balanced than it seems from the outside. A woman's ability to manage, adapt, and sustain daily life is essential. Without it, even the strongest foundation can begin to falter. And so, in this conversation, something important begins to take shape. Not just agreement, but alignment, a shared sense of what lies ahead. As they continue walking, the path curves slightly, leading them to a place where the land opens just enough to reveal the fields stretching into the distance. The setting sun casts a soft light across the landscape, turning everything into muted shades of gold and brown. They pause there, not because they need to, but because it feels natural. For a moment, neither of them speaks, and in that quiet, there is a sense of stillness that feels complete. Not because everything is decided, there are still many steps ahead, but because the uncertainty that once defined their connection has eased. What remains is something steadier, something that does not need to be questioned constantly. Eventually, they turn back. The village awaits, with all its routines and responsibilities. But as they walk, there is a subtle difference in the way they move. Not separate paths crossing briefly, but a shared direction. In the days that follow, preparations continue. The betrothal becomes more widely understood, even if it is never formally announced. People begin to speak of the future in quiet, practical terms, not as speculation, but as something expected. There are small tasks to complete: gathering materials, planning arrangements, considering timing. None of it is elaborate, but each piece brings the future a little closer. And within all of this, there are moments small, almost hidden, where something softer continues to grow. A brief exchange of words that carries a hint of warmth. A shared task completed with quiet ease. A look that no longer needs to be fleeting. These moments do not stand out on their own, but together they form something that feels real. Not dramatic, not overwhelming, but steady as spring deepens and the days stretch longer. The sense of movement toward the next stage becomes impossible to ignore. The wedding itself, simple, structured, shaped by tradition, begins to take form in the minds of those involved. And with that comes a quiet understanding that soon everything will change again, not in the way stories often describe, with sudden transformation or dramatic shift, but in the same way everything has changed so far, gradually, inevitably, step by step, until one life becomes two lives joined together, and the quiet path they have been walking separately becomes one they will share entirely as the days stretch longer and the warmth of spring settles fully over the land. The quiet understanding of what lies ahead begins to take clearer shape. What was once discussed in soft tones and careful words now moves steadily toward something visible, something that will soon be witnessed not just by a household, but by the wider village. The wedding approaches, not with urgency, but with a calm, steady progression. In medieval life, ceremonies were rarely extravagant for ordinary people. There were no elaborate decorations, no long lists of preparations stretching endlessly into detail. Instead, what mattered was simplicity, tradition, and the acknowledgement of a union that would carry practical and social significance. For the girl, the days leading up to the ceremony are filled with small but meaningful tasks. Clothing must be prepared not luxurious, but appropriate. Perhaps a simple dress, carefully mended, adjusted to fit just right. Every stitch carries quiet attention, not because it must impress, but because it represents transition. Her mother works alongside her, offering guidance without saying too much. There is no long speech about what lies ahead, no dramatic moment of farewell. Instead, knowledge is passed in quieter ways, through shared work, through small corrections, through the repetition of tasks that will soon become the daughter's responsibility in a different home. There are moments, though, when the mother pauses. A brief stillness, a look that lingers just a little longer than usual. These moments say what words do not. For the young man, preparation takes a different form. His focus remains on work, but with an added layer of intention. There may be small repairs to make in the space where they will live, adjustments to ensure that it is ready, not perfect, but functional. A place where two lives can begin to settle into one shared rhythm. He may also gather what little he can offer as part of the union. In some cases, this might be tools or simple goods or contributions agreed upon between families. These are not gifts in the modern sense, but symbols of readiness, proof that he can provide, at least to the best of his ability. As the day draws closer, the village becomes more aware. There is no formal announcement, but people begin to speak of it openly now. A quiet acknowledgement that something is about to happen. Not extraordinary, not rare, but still meaningful. Weddings, even simple ones, mark a shift not just for the couple, but for the community. They reinforce structure. They create continuity. They remind everyone of the roles they play within the larger pattern of life. On the morning of the ceremony, the village feels both familiar and slightly altered. The air carries a sense of quiet anticipation, not excitement in the loud, celebratory sense, but a softer awareness that this day holds significance. The girl wakes early. The light is gentle, filtering into the space that has been her home for as long as she can remember. She moves through the morning slowly, not out of hesitation, but out of a quiet recognition that this is the last time she will experience this place in quite the same way. Her mother helps her prepare. The process is simple: adjusting her clothing, smoothing fabric, ensuring everything is in place. There are no elaborate rituals, but there is care in every movement. At some point, their eyes meet, and in that brief moment, something passes between them. Not sadness, not quite, but understanding. For the young man, the morning is different. He prepares alone, or perhaps with brief acknowledgement from those around him. There is less ceremony in his preparation, less visible transition. His life is not being uprooted in the same way, but the weight of the day is still present. He steps into it with the same steady composure he has carried through everything so far. The ceremony itself is held in a familiar place, often the local church, or a central gathering space within the village. It is not large, but it is attended by those who matter. Family members, neighbors, familiar faces that have watched this process unfold from the beginning. The structure of the ceremony is simple. Words are spoken. Vows are made, though not in the elaborate, personalized way we might expect today. These are traditional words, shaped by religion and custom, repeated countless times across generations. And yet, within their simplicity, they carry weight, because they mark a commitment that is not easily broken. The girl stands beside the young man, her posture composed, her gaze steady. She listens, responds when required, her voice quiet but clear. He does the same. There is no dramatic moment, no sudden shift in expression, but there is a point, small, almost imperceptible, where what they have been moving toward becomes real, not in feeling, but in form. The ceremony concludes without spectacle. There may be a small gathering afterward, perhaps food shared, quiet conversation, a sense of acknowledgement rather than celebration. Laughter may appear here and there, but it is gentle, not overwhelming. And then, as quickly as it began, the day begins to settle. But for the two of them, everything has changed. Not outwardly, not in a way that transforms the world around them, but in the structure of their lives. The girl leaves her family's home, not dramatically, not with tears openly displayed, but with a quiet departure that carries its own kind of weight. She steps into a new space, one that will now become her own. The young man returns with her, not as someone visiting, but as someone bringing her into a shared life. The house or small space that awaits them is simple. There are no grand furnishings, no sense of luxury, but it is theirs in the way that matters. A place where routines will form, where days will pass, where life, in all its ordinary complexity, will unfold. That first evening is quiet. There are no expectations of immediate transformation, no sudden shift into something dramatically different. Instead, there is a sense of adjustment. Two people, now bound together, learning the shape of what that truly means. They move carefully around one another at first, not out of distance, but out of awareness. Every action feels slightly more significant, simply because it is shared. A meal is prepared, simple and familiar. A space is arranged for rest. Words are exchanged, but not many. There is no need to rush into anything, because in medieval life, marriage is not the end of the story. It is the beginning of something far more complex, a partnership shaped not by fleeting moments, but by the steady accumulation of days. And as night settles over their new home, bringing with it the same quiet stillness that has always existed, they step into that beginning, not with certainty of what lies ahead, but with the understanding that whatever it is, they will face it together. Morning arrives quietly, without ceremony, without pause, just as it always has. There is no sense that anything extraordinary has happened overnight. No visible marker that separates yesterday from today. And yet, as the first light slips gently into their small home, the difference is there, not in the world outside, but within the space they now share. The girl, now a wife, wakes first. For a moment, she remains still, not out of reluctance, but out of awareness. The room feels familiar in its simplicity, but unfamiliar in its meaning. The walls, the floor, the faint outline of objects in the early light, these are not new things. And yet, they belong to a new life. She rises carefully, moving with quiet intention. There is work to be done. There is always work to be done. The young man wakes shortly after. There is no long exchange of words between them. No dramatic acknowledgement of their first morning as husband and wife. Instead, there is a quiet coordination, an unspoken understanding that the day must begin. This is one of the defining realities of medieval marriage. It does not transform life into something softer or slower. If anything, it makes everything more immediate. Responsibilities do not wait. Fields still need tending. Water still needs carrying. Food still needs preparing. The rhythm of survival continues, unchanged by the ceremony that has just taken place. And so, they step into it together. At first, their movements are careful, not distant, not uncomfortable, but attentive. Each of them is aware of the other in a new way. Tasks that were once performed alone are now shared, even if only by proximity. She prepares the morning meal simple, modest, shaped by what is available. He gathers tools, checks what needs to be done outside. Their actions unfold side by side, not yet fully synchronized, but beginning to align. There is something quiet in this alignment, something that does not require explanation. Over the next few days, this pattern continues. Morning arrives, work begins, evening settles. There is little time for reflection, little space for lingering thoughts. Life moves forward with a steady pace, and within that pace, their relationship begins to take its true form, not through words, but through routine. This is where medieval marriage truly exists, not in the ceremony, not in the betrothal, but in the everyday, in the way two people share labor, in the way they adapt to each other's presence, in the way small habits begin to form. She learns how he works his pace, his methods, the rhythm of his day. He learns the same about her, the way she organizes tasks, the quiet efficiency of her movements, the subtle ways she maintains order within their home. There are moments of adjustment, times when their ways do not align perfectly, a task done differently than expected, a misunderstanding that lingers for a brief moment before settling. These are not conflicts in the dramatic sense, but they are part of the process, because living together is not immediate harmony. It is gradual understanding. In the evenings, after the day's work has been completed, there is a different kind of quiet, not the silence of uncertainty that once existed between them, but something steadier. They sit near the small fire, the light flickering softly against the walls. Sometimes they speak about the day, about what needs to be done tomorrow, about small observations that might seem insignificant to anyone else. Other times, they do not speak at all, and yet the silence does not feel empty. It feels shared. This is where something deeper begins to grow, not the kind of love that is spoken in grand words or expressed in dramatic gestures, but something quieter, something built from consistency, from presence, from the simple act of being there, day after day. As time passes, their roles become more defined. He takes on the heavier labor, the work that requires strength and endurance. She manages the home, the food, the countless small tasks that sustain daily life. But these roles are not entirely separate. There is overlap, cooperation, a constant exchange of effort. And within that exchange, a kind of balance begins to form. It is not perfect. It is not without strain. But it works. The village around them continues as it always has. Other couples move through similar rhythms. Other households form, grow, change. There is a sense that their experience is not unique, but part of a larger pattern that stretches beyond any single life. And yet, within that pattern, their own story continues to unfold. There are moments, small, almost invisible ones, that begin to stand out. A brief smile, exchanged over a shared task. A quiet acknowledgement after a long day. A sense of ease that was not there before. These moments are not dramatic. They do not interrupt the flow of life, but they accumulate, and over time, they begin to mean something. Weeks turn into months. The memory of the wedding fades into the background, replaced by the steady presence of everyday life. What remains is not the event, but the reality that followed it. And in that reality, something has taken root. Not quickly, not suddenly, but steadily. It is not the kind of connection that begins with certainty. It is the kind that becomes certain over time. As summer approaches and the days grow warmer, the rhythm of their life continues to deepen. Work becomes more demanding, but also more familiar. The patterns they have formed begin to feel natural, almost effortless. And within those patterns, there is a quiet understanding that this steady, unremarkable, consistent life is what their relationship truly is, not defined by a single moment, but by all the moments that come after. And as the sun sets on another ordinary day, casting long shadows across the land, they return once again to the small space they now call home, not as two individuals navigating uncertainty, but as two people who have begun, slowly and quietly, to build something together. As the warmth of summer settles over the land, bringing longer days and heavier work, the quiet rhythm of their shared life begins to reveal layers that were not immediately visible in those first weeks. What once felt new has now become familiar. What once required thought now happens without it. And within that familiarity, deeper aspects of their relationship begin to take shape, things rarely spoken about, but always present. In medieval life, marriage was not only about companionship or shared labor. It also carried expectations that were understood without needing to be explained. Among these was the expectation of intimacy, but intimacy in this world was very different from how it is often imagined today. It was not built on open conversation or emotional exploration. It was shaped by duty, by timing, by the quiet understanding that it was part of married life. There were no discussions about readiness, no guidance offered in soft, reassuring tones. Instead, it was something both individuals approached with a mixture of curiosity, uncertainty, and quiet acceptance. In the early days, this aspect of their relationship is approached carefully, not with distance, but with a kind of cautious awareness. They are no longer strangers, but they are still learning one another, not just in how they work or speak, but in how they exist in close, shared space. Every interaction carries a subtle sense of adjustment, as though they are both navigating something without a clear map. There are moments of hesitation, moments where silence feels heavier than before, but there are also moments where that hesitation softens, where the unfamiliar begins to feel less uncertain. Over time, this part of their relationship becomes less about uncertainty and more about routine, much like everything else in their lives. Not devoid of meaning, but integrated into the broader rhythm of their days. And with it comes another expectation, one that shapes much of medieval marriage, the expectation of children. This is not presented as a possibility, but as something almost inevitable. A household without children is often seen as incomplete, vulnerable. Children represent not only continuation, but support, future labor, future stability. And so, even without words, this expectation exists between them. It does not dominate every moment, but it is there, quietly influencing the way their life unfolds. For the girl now fully stepping into her role as a wife, this expectation carries particular weight. Her body becomes part of the structure of the household in a way that goes beyond daily tasks. Her ability to bear children is not just personal, it is tied to the future of their shared life. And yet, this is not something she speaks about openly. It is understood, felt, carried quietly, just like so many other aspects of her life. For the young man, the responsibility is different, but no less significant. He must ensure that the household can sustain growth, that there will be enough food, enough stability, enough structure to support what may come next. This adds another layer to his work. It is no longer just about the present. It is about preparing for something that has not yet arrived. As summer deepens, the demands of the season intensify. Days begin earlier. Work stretches longer. The sun, once gentle, now presses down with steady force, turning each task into something more exhausting. And within this demanding rhythm, their relationship continues to evolve, not through grand moments, but through endurance. There are days when fatigue settles heavily over both of them, when words are few, not because there is nothing to say, but because there is no energy left to say it. On those days, connection is not expressed through conversation, but through presence, through the simple act of continuing. Together, there are also moments of strain, small disagreements, misunderstandings that arise not from conflict, but from exhaustion, from the pressure of constant responsibility. These moments are rarely dramatic. They do not erupt into open argument. Instead, they appear briefly, creating a slight tension before fading back into the rhythm of daily life. And yet, even these moments serve a purpose. They reveal the edges of their understanding. They show where adjustment is needed. And over time, they contribute to a deeper sense of balance. Because medieval marriage is not built on the absence of difficulty. It is built on the ability to continue despite it. In quieter moments, rare as they may be, there is space for something softer. An evening where the work ends just a little earlier. A moment where they sit together, not out of necessity, but because there is time. In those moments, something gentle emerges, not spoken in elaborate words, but felt, a sense of familiarity that has grown beyond simple recognition, a comfort that exists without needing to be explained. It is not the kind of love that begins with intensity. It is the kind that forms slowly, shaped by shared experience, by the steady passing of days, and perhaps, in its own quiet way, it is just as real. As the season continues, the world around them moves forward without pause. The village hums with activity. Other households follow similar paths. Life continues in its steady, unbroken rhythm. And within that rhythm, their story becomes less distinct, less separate, not because it fades, but because it becomes part of something larger, a pattern repeated across time, a way of living that, while shaped by its own constraints, carries within it moments of connection that are no less meaningful for their simplicity. As the sun sets on another long summer day, casting a warm, fatting light across the fields, they return once again to their home, tired, quiet, but together, and in that togetherness, something continues to grow. Not quickly, not dramatically, but steadily, just like everything else in their world. The first hint of autumn arrives slowly, brushing the edges of the fields with a subtle change in light and temperature. Mornings grow cooler, and the air carries a crispness that was absent in the heat of summer. The rhythm of life remains relentless, yet the seasonal shift brings with it a new set of tasks: harvests to gather, storage to prepare, and preparations for the coming cold. For the young couple, this is more than routine. It is a reminder of how their shared life is both ordinary and urgent, bound tightly to the cycles of the natural world. The girl, now increasingly accustomed to her role as wife, feels the first stirrings of change within herself. There is a subtle tension in her body, a quiet awareness that something different is beginning. In medieval times, pregnancy was rarely spoken of openly in the earliest stages. It was understood by the body, observed by subtle changes in routine, but often not discussed directly until it became undeniable. The young man notices only small hints at first: a brief pause, a faint pallor, a hesitation in movement, but he understands. He has seen this before in the women of his family and village. The signs are familiar, though never entirely predictable. There is no question of discussion in detail. Instead, he adjusts, quietly observing and preparing. With pregnancy comes a new layer of responsibility. The household itself must adapt. Meals are prepared with more attention to nutrition. The daily tasks are balanced with care to avoid excessive strain. The physical demands of labor do not cease, yet an effort is made to distribute work in ways that accommodate the woman's changing needs. In some ways, this adaptation is instinctive. In others, it requires careful attention. The village responds, too, though subtly. Elders may offer advice. Neighbors may provide small tokens of assistance, a helping hand when heavy loads must be carried. These gestures are never formalized, but they carry the weight of community knowledge, the understanding that pregnancy is both a blessing and a risk. Indeed, risk is always present. In medieval times, childbirth is dangerous. Mortality rates are high, complications common, and medical knowledge limited. A pregnancy transforms not only the couple's life, but also the fragile equilibrium of the household. The young man moves with heightened awareness now, tending to the work outside, while ensuring the home inside remains safe and prepared. Every action is measured, small risks minimized wherever possible. For the girl, awareness of risk shapes her every movement. She walks carefully along familiar paths, balances her steps when carrying even modest loads, and tends to herself with a new mindfulness. Sleep becomes precious. Every day is measured in terms of endurance, not ambition. The excitement of new life is tempered by the quiet knowledge of vulnerability. Neighbors begin to speak in hushed tones. There are no announcements until the pregnancy is clearly visible, but awareness spreads quietly, shaping expectations. The couple is seen not merely as themselves anymore, but as the parents of the next generation, a future to be nurtured and safeguarded. As months pass, the household adjusts. The girl continues her daily tasks, though at a slightly moderated pace. The young man assumes greater responsibility for physically demanding chores, while also remaining attentive to the subtle needs that emerge within their shared home. Every meal, every preparation, every simple task is now layered with intention and care. The bond between them grows, not in dramatic displays, but in shared vigilance. There is a new intimacy that arises from mutual protection, from recognizing the fragility of life and the significance of continuity. It is quiet. It is often unspoken, but it is profound. Even as they adapt, they are not immune to anxiety. Every sound, every sudden motion, every illness in the village reminds them of the precariousness of life. Medieval families are intimately aware that survival is never guaranteed. Joy is always interwoven with fear. Each small milestone, first signs of life, the child's first movements, carries a mix of excitement and dread. By the time autumn deepens and the harvest is complete, the pregnancy becomes undeniable. The girl's body changes with visible evidence of the life she carries. Villagers offer their cautious congratulations. Neighbors bring small gifts of cloth, food, or herbs intended to nurture mother and child. Even the young man, though quiet in expression, feels the weight of expectation and responsibility pressing more heavily upon him. Their evenings, once dominated by the completion of daily work, now carry a new rhythm. They sit together more frequently, sharing quiet conversation, preparing for the changes that will soon arrive. There is still little talk of emotion or personal desire, but there is a deep, mutual understanding that the world they have built will expand, and the stakes have grown. Every task, every meal, every interaction is now contextualized by the impending birth. They work in tandem, not through words, but through observation, anticipating needs, sharing burdens. The rhythms of medieval domestic life merge with the rhythms of life within her body, forming a subtle but profound unity. And yet, despite the care, the inherent danger remains. They are both aware that the outcome is not guaranteed. The months of preparation, the careful attention, the community support all can help. But the forces of chance and circumstance still hold power. This awareness shapes the young couple's perception of time. Days are measured not in achievement, but in endurance. Nights are long, not for romance or reflection, but for rest, vigilance, and quiet thought. Life itself is lived in increments, each step observed and considered. As the season progresses, their shared routine becomes almost meditative. Work, meals, preparation, observation, and quiet reflection form the structure of their days. Within this structure, their connection deepens, not through overt displays of affection, but through consistency, care, and the recognition that they are now responsible for more than just themselves. It is in this rhythm, in this slow unfolding of shared life and preparation, that medieval marriages reveal their true nature. Not in ceremony, not in initial passion, not even in love as we understand it today, but in shared endurance, in mutual adaptation, and in the quiet, steady anticipation of the future. The chill of early winter creeps into the village long before the snow settles on the fields. The days shorten, and the light fades earlier, casting long shadows across familiar paths. Within their small home, the young couple feels the weight of anticipation pressing steadily against the routine of daily life. The girl's body now carries the unmistakable signs of late pregnancy, and each step she takes is measured, careful, deliberate. Every action is performed with a quiet mindfulness born of necessity. The young man observes her closely, not out of suspicion, but out of responsibility. He adjusts his work outside the home to ensure that heavy burdens are lifted or completed before she must attempt them. Tasks are divided with a precision born of experience and necessity. The fetching of water, chopping of wood, and tending of animals are balanced against her strength and endurance. There is no discussion of fear or emotion. Such things are rarely expressed openly, but in every movement, in every glance, there is a tacit acknowledgement of the danger inherent in what lies ahead. In medieval times, childbirth is never taken lightly. It is understood to be perilous for both mother and child. There are no hospitals, no modern interventions, no assurance of survival. Midwives, experienced in the practice of birth, are often summoned only when labor begins. Herbs, prayers, and centuries of passed down knowledge are all that stand between life and death. The girl spends these final days in careful preparation. She organizes her modest home, smoothing the floors, arranging bedding, and ensuring that the fire is easily managed. Each task carries an unspoken intention to make the space ready for what cannot be predicted. At night, she rests as much as her body allows, aware that the labor to come may demand more strength than she has yet needed to summon. The young man maintains a steady vigilance. He makes small adjustments to the home, moving tools out of the way, ensuring that water is easily accessible, and preparing a space where the midwife can work efficiently when the time arrives. These actions are quiet, practical, and precise. There is no sense of panic, but a continuous undercurrent of tension persists. They both know that preparation can mitigate risk, but cannot eliminate it. The community, too, becomes subtly involved. Neighbors may bring food, clean linens, or herbs thought to ease labor. Advice is offered in whispers, or through the practical demonstration of routine. This assistance is never intrusive. It is understood that labor is a private, delicate event, even as it is shared among the extended support network of the village. Finally, the day arrives when the signs of labor cannot be ignored. The girl moves slowly, breathing steadily, each step careful and deliberate. The young man stays close, hands ready to assist, body alert to every small movement, every sound. The midwife arrives, her presence commanding quiet respect and measured calm. She carries with her centuries of inherited knowledge, her hands skilled in what is both miraculous and dangerous. Labor begins with long, steady waves of pain and endurance. Time stretches and contracts unpredictably. Hours pass, measured not by clocks, but by the slow rhythm of contraction, rest, and movement. The young man remains a silent observer, offering support when requested, holding water, adjusting blankets, and ensuring that warmth and comfort are maintained. The midwife's voice is calm, steady, and instructional. Every command is precise, every encouragement deliberate. There are no dramatic pronouncements, no exclamations of fear or excitement. The focus is entirely on life, on survival, on the delicate balance that determines whether mother and child will emerge safely from this ordeal. The village watches from a respectful distance. Neighbors may pause in their work, sensing that something significant unfolds behind closed doors. There are no celebrations, no outward acknowledgement of the drama that has quietly gripped the household. In medieval life, such events are often private until their outcome is certain. Hours pass, marked by effort and endurance. Pain ebbs and flows. Strength is tested. The young man offers support where possible, his presence steady, silent, and unwavering. The midwife's hands guide the process with quiet authority, her knowledge transforming fear into methodical action. Finally, after what feels like an eternity, a new life emerges. The cries of the newborn are immediate, urgent, and full of vitality. Relief washes through the room, though exhaustion is equally present. The girl rests, pale but triumphant in her endurance, as the midwife attends to both mother and child with practiced precision. The young man holds the infant gently, marveling at the small, fragile life that has arrived through such immense effort. The household breathes differently now. Each member, mother, father, child, occupies a space transformed by survival, endurance, and shared responsibility. The room itself seems smaller, more intimate, as the presence of the newborn alters the dynamics of care, attention, and daily rhythm. In the days following birth, the routines of medieval life return almost immediately, though with modifications. The girl is tended to carefully, allowed rest, nourished with simple foods meant to strengthen her. The young man continues his work, but with increased attention to her needs and the safety of the infant. Every small action, feeding, cleaning, moving, is imbued with a new awareness of vulnerability. Sleep is rare and fragmented. The cries of the newborn punctuate every hour, demanding attention, vigilance, and care. Meals are prepared with haste, but also with careful consideration for both mother and child. The rhythms of work and domestic life intertwine seamlessly with the demands of nurturing new life, creating a delicate balance between survival, responsibility, and the quiet satisfaction of sustaining continuity. This early stage of parenthood is defined by endurance more than joy. The love that grows is not romanticized. It is practical, resilient, and deeply rooted in necessity. Each feeding, each soothing gesture, each careful movement reinforces the bonds between the young couple and the child they have brought into the world. The risks remain ever present. Illness, fatigue, and accident are constant concerns. Each day is measured not by leisure or comfort, but by careful attention to life's fragility. In medieval life, happiness is found not in luxury or ease, but in survival, continuity, and the quiet accumulation of small victories. By the time winter deepens, the household has settled into a rhythm that accommodates the newborn, balancing care, labor, and the slow return of confidence and ease. The young couple has learned to navigate the intersection of responsibility, endurance, and shared life. Their bond, formed over months of preparation, labor, and adaptation, has deepened in ways invisible to any observer. And as the first snow falls, dusting the roofs and fields, the quiet miracle of new life continues to pulse through the household. Every breath, every small gesture, every shared glance carries the weight and wonder of survival. As winter stretches onward, the household slowly adjusts to its new configuration. The infant, small, fragile, and demanding, becomes the center of daily life, shaping every action, every decision. In medieval households, children are both a source of joy and a practical concern. Their survival is uncertain. Every cough, every sudden cry carries the weight of potential danger. Yet their presence also brings purpose, a tangible representation of continuity and hope in a world defined by hardship. The girl, now a mother, moves through her days with a careful attention that borders on instinct. She rises with the child's needs, her sleep measured in short fragments. She tends to meals, the hearth, and the home, but all her actions are now filtered through the constant consideration of the infant. Even the simplest tasks, carrying water, sweeping the floor, or tending the fire, require calculation, a weighing of effort against potential strain. The young man, meanwhile, continues his work outside, the though his perspective has shifted. Every trip to the fields, every errand in the village, carries a subtle calculation. How will this affect his family? Will he be able to return quickly if needed? Can the child and mother be left safely? These are not questions he articulates aloud, but they shape his movements, his priorities, and the way he measures time. As the weeks pass, small routines begin to form. The infant's cries dictate the rhythm of waking and sleeping, and the household gradually finds a balance. In medieval life, survival shapes intimacy and partnership as much as affection does. The young couple grows accustomed to acting in concert, often without words, anticipating each other's needs, responding to the cues of the child and the demands of the day. The child grows slowly but steadily, each milestone a subtle victory. The first smile, the first tentative movements, the gradual emergence of sound and recognition, all are cause for quiet celebration. Joy is never extravagant. It is contained, practical, and intertwined with the ever-present awareness of fragility. To the couple, each small success is both relief and reward. Winter is harsh, but it also fosters closeness. The cold drives the family together, creating a sense of shared endurance. Simple pleasures, a warm hearth, a quiet moment in the fatting light, a meal eaten in companionship become the markers of life. These are not dramatic or sensational. They are the steady, invisible threads that hold daily existence together. The household is also influenced by the wider village. Neighbors offer advice, food, and assistance, often in subtle ways that maintain privacy but ensure safety. The midwife may return periodically to check on the mother and child, offering guidance, reassurance, and herbal remedies. This support network, though understated, is vital to survival in a world without formal health care or guarantees. As the months progress, the young couple becomes increasingly skilled at navigating the complexities of family life. The mother learns to perform tasks with one hand while holding or comforting the child with the other. The father adjusts his labor to accommodate unpredictable needs. Each develops a form of efficiency born not of desire for perfection, but of necessity. Responsibilities expand naturally. Feeding, cleaning, maintaining the home, and tending animals are all performed in tandem, with consideration for the child's safety. Each member of the household learns to anticipate the demands of the other. Coordination becomes second nature, a silent dialogue of movement, gesture, and awareness. The child's presence also begins to shape social interactions. Visitors are welcomed cautiously. Conversations are measured to avoid disturbing sleep, and every action outside the home is weighed against the potential impact on the infant. Life is circumscribed by the delicate balance of care, work, and community interaction. Even as survival dominates the family's focus, the quieter aspects of connection continue to develop. Moments of shared laughter, gentle glances, and coordinated effort form a subtle emotional fabric. Love, in this context, is practical, grounded in presence and shared experience rather than verbal expression or romanticized sentiment. The young man and woman learn each other's rhythms more intimately. They recognize exhaustion, discomfort, and frustration without the need for words. They develop patience born of necessity, understanding that endurance and cooperation are more valuable than fleeting expression or individual desire. Through the growing months, the child also begins to interact with the world around them. The first touch of snow, the observation of animals in the yard, the subtle movements of neighbors or older children, each impression becomes part of their understanding of life. And the parents, ever vigilant, guide these experiences carefully, balancing curiosity with caution. By the end of the first year, the household has established a complex, delicate rhythm. Life is defined by the needs of the child, the demands of survival, and the quiet collaboration of the couple. Each day is measured not in hours or leisure, but in fulfillment of duties, careful observation, and shared endurance. In medieval life, this is the essence of family, a network of interdependent actions, guided by awareness of fragility and sustained by routine, vigilance, and quiet adaptation. Moments of joy and connection emerge naturally, but they are woven tightly into the fabric of necessity and practicality. Love and partnership are measured in acts, endurance, and the persistent presence of one another, rather than in dramatic gestures or idealized emotion. As the seasons shift once more, the family prepares to face another winter. The child grows steadily, the household adapts, and the young couple continues to learn the intricate dance of survival, responsibility, and quiet companionship. Each day, each small success, each trial endured together reinforces the strength of their bond. Spring returns slowly to the village, bringing with it the promise of renewal and the subtle reshaping of daily life. Snow melts into muddy paths, streams swell with runoff, and the air carries the faint, sweet scent of early blooms. For the young family, these seasonal shifts bring both new challenges and opportunities. The child, now crawling and beginning to stand with unsteady determination, introduces a new rhythm to the household. Every movement is unpredictable. Every small success demands attention, and every step is both a triumph and a potential hazard. The mother's role continues to evolve. Her movements are more deliberate, balancing care of the child with the ongoing demands of household maintenance. She prepares meals with one hand while holding or supervising the infant with the other. She tends the hearth, cleans, and arranges clothing and bedding, always with an eye on safety and routine. In medieval life, mothers are constantly engaged in the dual tasks of nurturing and managing labor, often without acknowledgement or praise. Their skill lies in endurance, efficiency, and anticipation, rather than in overt recognition. The father's work remains vital, but the presence of a child shifts his priorities. Trips to the fields, carrying firewood, and tending livestock are approached with heightened awareness. He returns frequently, aware of small noises that indicate distress, ready to intervene without hesitation. Every action, every plan, is shaped by the awareness that the household's smallest member is now an active participant in their survival. Early learning for the child is gradual and experiential. In a world without formal schooling for the very young, observation and imitation become the primary methods of acquiring skills. Crawling along the floor, the child watches utensils, tools, and daily routines. They mimic movements, experiment with objects, and gradually develop the coordination and understanding needed to participate in household life. The parents provide guidance primarily through demonstration and correction rather than verbal instruction, shaping the child's behavior subtly but consistently. Socialization is also critical. Neighbors, siblings, or older children in the village act as informal teachers and companions. Interaction with others teaches caution, cooperation, and awareness of social norms. Even brief exchanges, such as sharing a simple toy or observing communal work, instill lessons about hierarchy, respect, and cooperation that will shape the child's role within the village. The household itself adapts to these new dynamics. Spaces are organized to minimize danger. Sharp tools are moved out of reach. Fires are closely monitored, and the child's movements are guided with gentle intervention. This constant vigilance defines medieval parenting. The line between supervision and intervention is narrow, and attentiveness is continuous. Throughout these early years, the relationship between the parents deepens in subtle ways. Shared endurance, mutual vigilance, and the quiet navigation of constant responsibility reinforce their bond. Expression of emotion remains understated. Affection is measured through acts, the careful handing of the child, the provision of food, the maintenance of warmth and safety. Moments of tenderness are woven into the daily fabric, not separated as ceremonial or extraordinary, but integrated into the routine of life itself. As the child grows, the household's social standing also becomes relevant. A thriving child brings respect and recognition within the village, evidence of the parents' competence and diligence. Conversely, struggles with health or behavior are quietly observed and may shape perceptions. Community awareness is ever present, though interactions remain pragmatic and understated rather than intrusive or gossipy. The seasons continue to shape every decision. Planting, harvesting, and storage are all integrated with childcare. Work is planned around the child's needs. Meals are timed carefully, and rest periods are coordinated to ensure that both parent and child can endure the long, physically demanding days. In medieval life, survival dictates scheduling, and nurturing a child is inseparable from sustaining the household. The child begins to acquire practical skills through observation, stacking wood, carrying small items, assisting with food preparation. Each new capability is celebrated quietly, reinforcing the sense of accomplishment without ceremony. These lessons are essential. In a world where self-sufficiency is vital from a young age, early engagement in household tasks ensures the child will eventually contribute meaningfully to family survival. As the young couple navigates these years, they also encounter small crises, illness, harsh weather, scarcity of food. Each event tests endurance, resourcefulness, and cooperation. Adaptation is continuous. Strategies are improvised, priorities reassessed, and vigilance maintained. Through these challenges, the family's resilience deepens and their interconnectedness strengthens. By the time the child reaches toddlerhood, the household has evolved into a well-coordinated unit. Roles are defined, routines are established, and the rhythm of life, work, care, observation, and adaptation runs steadily. The child is active, observant, and gradually participating in the communal responsibilities of survival, while the parents navigate the delicate balance between guidance, protection, and fostering independence. Life in the medieval village remains harsh and unpredictable. Yet it is within this structure that the family finds stability. Success is measured not in wealth or leisure, but in the continuity of life, the growth of the child, and the endurance of daily existence. Love, partnership, and parental care are expressed in acts of reliability, patience, and steady attention foundations, as vital as shelter, fire, or sustenance. As the child grows into early childhood, the rhythms of the household become more complex, but also more stable. Crawling gives way to walking, tentative steps to confident strides. The child begins to explore the home and the yard, learning boundaries, testing limits, and observing the actions of both parents and neighbors. In medieval society, these formative years are critical. Children absorb knowledge through imitation, observation, and participation in everyday tasks long before they understand rules or social expectations. The mother continues her careful guidance, showing the child how to carry small items, fold cloth, or assist in preparing meals. Her lessons are subtle, practical, and repeated often. There is no formal instruction, no textbooks, no structured curriculum. Every act teaches survival, endurance, and social expectation. Every correction, every demonstration reinforces an understanding of roles and responsibility. The father involves the child gradually in his work outside the home. Simple tasks, gathering kindling, feeding chickens, or carrying water become exercises in skill, coordination, and patience. Mistakes are corrected gently, and successes quietly praised. Over time, the child begins to understand the essential principle of medieval life. That contribution, however small, is valued and necessary. The village itself acts as an extended classroom. Older children, neighbors, and relatives model behaviors, transmit customs, and demonstrate practical skills. Socialization is immersive. Children learn hierarchy, respect, and cooperation through observation, imitation, and gentle instruction. They also begin to understand the rhythms of labor, the importance of shared responsibility, and the role of family within the broader community. As the child develops, the parents' relationship continues to evolve. Early dependence, vulnerability, and mutual care have forged a steady bond, a partnership grounded in endurance rather than dramatics. Love manifests not in grand words or gestures, but in steady presence, shared responsibility, and small acts of attention and patience. They are no longer merely husband and wife. They are co-managers of a household, co-guardians of life, and co-navigators of uncertainty. Challenges remain ever present. Illness, weather, scarcity, and accident all pose constant threats. Every day requires vigilance, adjustment, and careful planning. Yet, within this continuous struggle, there is accomplishment. Each completed task, each survived season, each small success of the child reinforces resilience, competence, and the quiet satisfaction of continuity. The child, now becoming more independent, begins to contribute meaningfully. Feeding animals, helping with simple chores, and assisting in meal preparation become part of daily life. Each task, though modest, carries significance. The household's survival depends on cooperation, and the child's growing abilities are woven seamlessly into the family's rhythms. As years pass, the child's presence reshapes the social and emotional landscape of the household. Their curiosity drives observation and adaptation. Their small triumphs provide markers of time, growth, and achievement. They also offer a new dimension to parental responsibility, requiring ongoing teaching, correction, and encouragement. Through this continuous process, the household reflects the essence of medieval family life: survival, responsibility, and continuity, defined by work, observation, endurance, and the quiet nurturing of the next generation. Joy is subtle, woven into small successes, shared meals, and the gentle presence of family members who have grown together through hardship. Finally, as the child reaches an age where participation in household and community labor becomes substantial, the family settles into a rhythm that balances survival, growth, and social integration. The parents have navigated betrothal, marriage, childbirth, infancy, and early childhood, learning together through endurance, observation, and mutual care. Their love, often invisible to outsiders, is steadfast, practical, and enduring. By the time the child can assist meaningfully with work and understand social obligations, the household embodies the full cycle of medieval family life. Generations are prepared for continuity. Skills are transmitted through practice, and the rhythms of survival remain embedded in daily life. The bond between parents, shaped by shared labor, vigilance, and quiet adaptation, stands as a testament to the realities of human connection in a world defined by endurance rather than leisure. Life continues hard, steady, and resilient. The seasons move inexorably onward, the village functions, and the family persists. Children grow, parents age, and the household passes knowledge and skill from one generation to the next. In this relentless rhythm, life endures. Love manifests quietly in acts of presence and responsibility, and the cycle of survival continues with both fragility and perseverance. In the end, medieval family life, with its trials, routines, and small triumphs, reveals a truth that transcends time. Connection is forged not in dramatic moments, but in endurance, mutual care, and the unspoken understanding that life, no matter how difficult, is sustained through shared effort, vigilance, and the quiet accumulation of daily acts of responsibility and love.